You don't remember me, but we used to know each other. Something bad was gonna happen, and the only way to stop it was to review Spider-Man Brand New Day. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we're going to be discussing or debating Spider-Man Brand New Day. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. So, guys, what's the best thing that you've seen in the past week?
What have I watched in the past week? A couple more episodes of The Wire. What I actually appreciate about the show is like they're actually like taking the time to establish things and set things up, and they're not kind of like rushing into anything or any of the like main kind of storylines. They're like planting a few seeds, sowing some seeds into the narrative that I assume will pay off later. But kind of 4 episodes in, I think so far so good. We've got who our characters are, the situation on the police side, with this kind of case that the police bosses don't want to deal with and are trying to kind of like bury, and then you got your passionate police officers that really wanted to do their good job and etc. And you got like that dynamic on that side, and then obviously like the street side, the street side, and yeah, they're just kind of like plant some seeds, sowing a few things. Good to see some like there's like references that I've like known for like ages from The Wire, and actually just like seeing it in here is actually really good. So like the one where like Omer's coming and stuff like that. That's like pop culture, but I just like hadn't ever watched The Wire, so seeing that in the show was pretty good. But I don't know, I'm a few more episodes in. I think I'll probably give like a better summary after I've actually watched the full season of The Wire. But apart from that, I don't think I've caught anything else. So yeah, go check out The Wire.
I'm currently watching the Netflix series called The Cleaning Lady. Really, really good show. I think I'm on season 2 so far. It's pretty much about, a cleaning lady from Cambodia who's undocumented, but she grew up in the Philippines. She comes over to America to raise money, I believe, and for her son for surgery. And while she's cleaning one event, she ends up witnessing a crime from this crime family. And one of the guys pretty much has compassion for her, doesn't really want her to die. So by saving her, he kind of like makes her the cleaning lady for the crime family. So whenever they do commit a crime, she just cleans up afterwards, literally. And throughout that gets stickier, and then she ends up becoming an FBI informant. And then I'm not gonna say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it gets stickier from there, and it gets exciting. I'll definitely say surprisingly, this has turned out to be a very good series for me. Similar with the experience I had with Animal Kingdom, because these are shows from the trailers that I wouldn't really watch, but then when I gave them a chance, I said, you know what, these shows have been really amazing. So The Cleaning Lady is definitely in that list. I would definitely say story is really good, character arcs are really good, and just the way situations get worse after a cause and effect is really like is done really good in this show. So I'll definitely say you guys should give this one a chance. And it shows obviously the kind of, I don't want to use the word brutality, but kind of like, what's the word? Dreadness is not a word, but it's dread the way undocumented people kind of like live in terms of that paranoia. It definitely does capture that very well, and how you have to be very careful when you are undocumented in living in America.
I think the word you're looking for is precariousness.
Yes.
Is that it? Like this idea that nothing is safe, nothing is guaranteed, you cannot rely on anybody.
Well,
your life could be turned upside down at any moment.
yeah.
That's the thing.
When I said dreadness, I don't mean dreadness as in like the actual word dread. I meant the slang version, as in like when something's dread. Yeah, sorry, by the way, because the dreadness dread is actually a word, but in terms of the slang meaning of dread is like, how do you explain dread?
Oh, it's like, oh, that's like unfortunate that happened to him, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like unfortunate that happened to him.
Yeah, like that. So
Well, all words either mean good or bad, right? So this means bad.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so this week I watched the new season of Rick and Morty, which is season 9. Rick and Morty continues to do excellent existential, high concept sci-fi stuff, and season 9 is it's not all bangers, but it is like maybe 7 out of 10 episodes are really, really good, and there were like 2 or 3 that I was a little bit lukewarm on. But it just stays true to its premise. It continues to kind of evolve its characters and move them forward, and each episode is an out there, unpredictable premise where about halfway into the 20-minute episode you even realize what is going on, and it always takes it somewhere that makes sense and that there's a plan, right? So one favorite episode in this was, so in the early seasons they make their pet dog intelligent, and it leads to a slave uprising because it turns out the dogs don't like being kept as pets, and now that they're intelligent they can fight back. And that was like a season 1 or 2 episode, and now they come back, and the dimension they left to in season 1, they've turned it into a fascist eugenicist dog supremacist empire, America where they're enslaving humans. And now the main characters have to reckon with what they've done, essentially, because all of this is happening because of them. So that's one episode. And there's another one where they are trapped by an intelligent tree in a cycle of reincarnation, where they think they need to, like, the point of the cycle is to learn compassion, empathy, and pacifism. And then it turns out that the whole thing is just a little bit more sinister and kind of goes off the rails from there. So that's the kind of thing you can expect from Rick and Morty. I actually saw the ratings of this, and it's cratered, like, it was like peak popularity in season 3 or 4 or something like that, and it's cratered to maybe 10 or 20% of its peak. But I think that's because the show actually has gotten more mature and more intelligent, and kind of like the cultural moment kind of has moved on from it. But like, if you just like high concept sci-fi that is intelligent and not as crude as it used to be, but still just has just a little bit of edge, I think it's still the best at what it does at the moment. So I would recommend that.
Cool. Well, looks like it's time for the main event. Lord have mercy. I don't know what happened to my voice there. Apologies, guys. But it looks like it's time for the main event. So, Spider-Man Brand New Home. Sorry, Brand New Day.
The one that doesn't have home in the title, right? So it is an understandable error.
My bad. Sorry. Okay, Spider-Man Brand New Day. Daniel, please do your thing.
So Spider-Man Brand New Day is the newest entry in the MCU and the 5th Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland starring as Spider-Man. It picks up from the last one from 2021, where Doctor Strange cast a spell that made everybody forget Peter Parker. And so now Peter is essentially in exile, living in an attic, fighting crime, just doing his thing and kind of stalking his old friends, but not being able to go near them. And then when somebody launches an attack on the damage control headquarters, which kind of handles the cleanup and containment of superpowered threats in the MCU now, he gets drawn into a web of intrigue and schemes, and the story then unfolds from there. So what did we think of Spider-Man Brand New Day?
So overall, I would say I had a good time with this. Now, it wasn't a great film because firstly, I was a bit confused by the public's reaction to this movie. Like, I didn't know it was going to be a thing where so many seats were going to be sold out. Like, it was crazy. I didn't know the anticipation for this film was going to be so high. But I believe that's because obviously the last film came out nearly 5 years ago. So that makes sense. That being said, because I forgot what the other movies were like, so I said to myself, okay, so maybe the other Spider-Man movies were really, really, really good. So I thought the standard was going to be high. So when I watched this one, I was thinking, okay, it was good, but it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. Like I said, it was a good film. I definitely do like how they portrayed isolation and loneliness in this movie. And the story was cool. I did like the relationship between Punisher and Spider-Man. That was definitely something that worked for me. And I did like the new introduction of obviously the villain. She was good as well. It's just overall, it just wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be, but I did have a good time with it.
All right, guys. I don't know what Jonathan's talking about. This is top two. This is top 2 live action Spider-Man movies, and it might not be. It might not be 2. Genuinely, I can't really find much of a fault in this. Like, everything about this was handled correctly. It followed on really well from where we left off in No Way Home. I thought, again, like the emotional sort of kind of weight of the movie was handled like really well. Again, like, Jonathan mentioned about sort of dealing with isolation, loneliness, feeling like, you're having to really kind of separate out Peter Parker from Spider-Man. I think it's really telling that he spends a lot of time in this movie in a Spider-Man costume, because he's kind of almost similar to what sort of Batman does with Bruce Wayne, where you're abandoning that side of you and you're just kind of like fully going into, being Spider-Man and like everything that comes with that. I thought all of that was great. I thought the way that they incorporated all the other kind of like MCU elements was done really well, and I think this is kind of how it should be done, where every character in here was a way to kind of serve Spider-Man, and they all served a purpose in the movie. They weren't there just for the sake of being there, just so you can be like, oh, this is part of the MCU. It's like, no, they all serve a narrative purpose in the story. I thought the action in this was really great. We got to see Hulk again, finally. I won't hold my breath on whether, we fully get him back, but it was just good to see Hulk being Hulk in this. And again, a lot of the combat that you do see in the trailers, like, the fight with the hand and stuff like that was done really well. I really like the transformation that that was kind of going on between him and his, well, I don't know if that might be spoilers, to be fair, so I won't go too much into that until we get into the later parts. And I liked how like this movie kind of almost like teased huge implications for what's to come, especially with sort of the direction that the MCU is looking to go into, most likely after Secret Wars with the X-Men, etc. There's like things in here that have like huge implications, or potentially have huge implications for that as well. And yeah, I just thought like the chemistry between all the cast as well was just kind of brilliant. Like having Punisher in this, it just works. Like, it's just one of those things that just works. The dynamic between like Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and sort of MJ. Jonathan, I know you call him Mary Jane, which is the standard, but in the MCU, she's technically Michelle Jones. It's like a variation of it for whatever reason.
Right, my
But
bad.
but yeah, but their dynamic was great. Ned in this is great as well. Again, I don't know if it's a spoiler to say, but the use of like a past character that is no longer in the movie, but the use of her in the movie as well was like done really really well and really effective. And yeah, I quite like something of what. Well, I mean, I don't know why they tried to keep it a secret in the marketing, because like I think the minute they cast Sadie Sink, everyone kind of knew who she was going to be. But you know, having her in the movie and her as a villain, I know some people don't like that she's not like your traditional Spider-Man villain, and so no, it's not who you'd probably want to see. But for me, it's like, how many times can we recycle, the Rogues Gallery, and how many times can we recycle like Cyclops? Not Cyclops, sorry. Not Cyclops. What was it? Wow, I got his name. Scorpion. Sorry, how can we like Scorpion? Like, I know we've done like these guys like once or whatever, but I'm not trying to see them be sort of the main villain in this, and like your Doc Ocks and stuff like that. Like we've kind of seen all that, so to kind of have something a little bit different and not your traditional sort of type of villain, I thought worked quite well in this movie as well. So yeah, this is thumbs up all around. I'm a little bit upset that I didn't get to watch it one more time, because I watched it on Wednesday. I kind of wanted to watch it one more time before the review, but we kind of had to jig things around. But yeah, no, this was peak. This was fantastic.
Usual disclaimer at the start, I'm traveling in Germany right now, and so I had to watch this in German, and I might have missed a whole bunch of details, nuance, like in the atmosphere and the tone and the dialogue. So I am looking forward to rewatching this again in the original, just to see if it hits a little bit better in that version. But having said that, one thing I'm gonna disagree with you, Hervé, is that this is not the best Spider-Man movie in the MCU. It's the two best Spider-Man movies. The problem is they're in the same movie. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I like in this. I like how character focused it is. I like how it's not like a generic Spider-Man story. It's just not another one because the last one made money. This is driving the status quo in the MCU forward. This is driving Spider-Man as a character forward. This is dealing with fallout from the last movie, specifically Doctor Strange's spell that made the world forget him and so on. I think the emotional stuff with MJ and Ned works pretty well. I think the story about him kind of dealing with kind of his identity and being different and trying to suppress part of his nature, and then having to run into and then dealing at the same time with a mutant whose entire thing is about self-actualization and being oppressed because she is different and therefore doesn't want to be fixed and so on, right? Like, so that's all well-worn X-Men stuff, but I think it works quite well. The problem is they're both in the same movie. And as a result, the movie is about an hour too long. And I don't think the two halves really speak to each other, but then the movie tries to convince you that it does, like that those two stories are actually the same story or that they inform each other. And I don't think they do. I think a lot of the details relating to Peter dealing with the fallout of being alone and being forgotten versus dealing with the realization that damage control are the real villains, and this whole theme of suppressing your nature because it's dangerous to other people or it's hard to control. Those two things I don't think have anything to do with each other. In addition to that, in a 2.5 hour long movie, you need more than 2 good action scenes, and there's two in this that I think are really quite good, and the rest are pretty basic, where there's a lot of web slinging, a lot of throwing webs around, a lot of dodging and acrobatics, but it's basically very standard stuff, right? Like it's almost like it's filler, and I think there's just a little bit too much of that in this week. I wish there was just more than just 2 good scenes in a 2.5 hour long Spider-Man movie, or 2 good action scenes rather. So I think overall it's really good. I think the character stuff mostly lands. I think the performances are good. Like, everybody's really trying to elevate this. I think Punisher is a really good addition to this, where he's a really good contrast in a few key aspects to Peter, and that actually challenges Peter and actually gives him something to think about. So there's a lot of pieces I like in this. Overall, I think it's probably the best thing the MCU has done in several years. Certainly anything that they put out last year. So this is very much a step in the right direction. I'm not, but I did feel like it was held back a little bit by there just being so much time spent on these 2 largely unrelated stories. And I think the whole thing could have been cleaner if it had been just a little bit more focused and a little bit more focused on theme, where the different major pieces actually do have something to do with each other and kind of inform each other and speak to each other. They didn't, and as a result, for a lot of time, I felt there was a whole bunch of wheel spinning. But there's enough good in here that overall I enjoy the experience. Okay, so let's talk about it.
So usually with Spider-Man movies, there's always going to be like, a grounded balance with the whole New York crime mystery mixed with, the larger MCU crossover when it comes to like characters like the Hulk, etc., etc. So one thing that I did really like about the movie was it did feel like just a normal crime, street level crime type of series, but then you did have elements of superheroes, well, of villains. So with this one, it kind of was just kind of like the balance with the real world, of Spider-Man being in the real world fighting crime mixed with, the villains, like the whole superhero element of things. So I felt like there was a really good blend with this one in this movie. So I was gonna ask, how do you guys feel about the balance between the two in this one?
So that's been one of the things about the MCU Spider-Man, is that he does a lot of the things that are classic superhero stuff that the MCU has basically ignored, right? So he has a secret identity and it's a major plot point. He actually fights crime. He actually investigates things. That is something that most MCU characters have not really done in a long time, where it's more about super powered people fighting each other, whereas here there's a lot more classic superhero stuff going on. I do think it, like, first of all, it gives it a distinct identity, right? So it's not just a guy in a costume throwing energy bolts around. I like how specific all of this is to Spider-Man, from the way he moves to the way he fights to the way he talks to the way he approaches the problem. I also like that like he's actually, like, there are several scenes that are kind of filler, but they kind of give a sense of what New York is like and what he does, and it usually involves people fighting crime, like this idea that he has an app that alerts him to ongoing crime, and the fact that he has a contact in the police who basically cleans up for him so that he can do his job, and he allows her to do her job, and so on. All of that is stuff that is like classic superhero stuff that's kind of been left behind by the MCU a little bit, and I think all of that works really well in this.
Also, Jonathan, to kind of your point as well, I think this is what Spider-Man is meant to be and what people have been asking for, and the direction that people want to see is the essence of Spider-Man is he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and he has like a lot of those kind of he's meant to be like really intelligent, he's meant to be like quippy, he's meant to kind of be like really street level, and I think this movie portrays that in a really good way, in the sense of, like, obviously we see him sort of fighting day-to-day crime. We see when he kind of encounters a problem, you see that he has like a certain level of intelligence about him when he's like interacting with like Bruce Banner, etc., to to solve the problem that he's facing in the movie. What you're kind of describing is what people wanted out of the Spider-Man movies, and it's kind of exactly what we got in this. And I think it works really well in a sense. But I say it works really well because it's kind of what we were expecting.
But sorry, when you say this is what people were asking for, so does that mean the previous movies it wasn't that?
I wouldn't say it wasn't that, but I think Homecoming was a kind of good example of it. I think Far From Home kind of took him out of New York, and that kind of takes away a little bit of the essence of Spider-Man. When he's kind of like traversing around Europe and stuff like that, it's kind of not where we want to see him. And then of course No Way Home was like this big spectacle, nostalgia fest of having all the previous Spider-Mans and everyone else and all the previous villains as well, kind of being part of it. So it kind of took away from the story being really centered around Tom Holland Spider-Man and him and his kind of like day to day. That's why at the end of No Way Home, when he kind of enters his New York apartment and he's kind of all alone and he's kind of lost all of his allies, and he's really in that moment having to become having to kind of, and I think they view the original Homecoming Home trilogy as like a coming of age thing, and then now like we're stepping into the more mature, more adult version of Spider-Man, and it kind of in this period here where they've kind of almost made him start over. He's kind of lost some of the connections he's had with other people. Maybe not entirely, because obviously there's characters that do have to come back, or not do have to, but they want to bring back, etc. But it's kind of him kind of rediscovering himself a little bit in this, and also it kind of comes with the personal problems that he has, and like Spider-Man's meant to be relatable in terms of the personal issues that he has, personal problems that he has in the day to day, and like I think in this one they kind of really centered it around his like isolation and his like loneliness, and like really feeling like anytime he's in like people's lives, it only brings bad things. And you saw what happened with his Aunt May in the last movie where she died, and he constantly is putting his friends at risk, even though in this movie they kind of play up to that and say like, how is that really working, because we're still in this situation essentially. And that kind of brings me to a point that Daniel mentioned as well about how some of the different elements of the movie. You've got like the kind of like the Jean Grey and the X-Men kind of like plot and that stuff. I think it's that what Daniel was saying is kind of one thing, and then you have like the MJ, the Ned, and the Peter Parker side things on the other side. Like I kind of just saw that as like on one side he's kind of reckoning with the Peter Parker element of it, of like he's kind of isolated himself from other people. And again, why I say that, people, the kind of other characters kind of support Peter Parker's journey or Spider-Man's journey in this, is because you have people like Punisher, kind of showing as an example of like, if you're, if you really isolate yourself and if you really try to push everyone away and you like really try to, head down this I'm just Spider-Man, and you kind of neglect, Peter Parker, and you neglect making connections with other people. But this is like the kind of life that you might end up living, where like, Frank Castle's like all alone on this place. He doesn't trust anyone. There's like booby traps all over the place. And it's almost like a metaphor of like not letting anyone in, and there's like so many different walls and so many different barriers, and that's kind of, the path that Spider-Man might be heading down if he's pushing people away. And then you have on the other side, it's on the other side, it's the actual sort of issues that Spider-Man has to deal with. It's like, this is the latest crime that's going on, and like, he's having to sort of kind of reckon with that whilst trying to sort of solve what's going on with like his change and his mutation, his adaptation, and kind of I can't find like the right words for it, so I'm gonna like possible to Daniel here, but I do feel like there's like two distinct things here going, and I think eventually they do kind of come together quite well. But Daniel, go on.
I think that part that you're touching on there is one of the better parts of the movie, right? So I think Punisher works really well in this, and he is kind of a foreshadowing of what happens if Peter doesn't harmonize his civilian side with the Spider-Man part, right? Because a major theme in Spider-Man has always been that Spider-Man's problems come from the different parts of his identity and his different obligations not being balanced. But every time he tries to balance them, he further unbalances them by letting somebody down or being stretched too thin or making mistakes and that sort of thing, right? So that's classic Spider-Man stuff. And here, his Peter Parker side is really neglected because he has no, like, May is gone, his friends have forgotten him, right? Because of the curse. And that part is like, and he basically, like, to the point where he orders delivery foods, like he orders delivery, but he doesn't even talk to the delivery guy, right? He has this whole drop-off system, right? Where he does everything in his power to avoid contact with other people. When his neighbors start recognizing him and start speaking to him, he moves into the attic so they can avoid even running into other people on that level. So that part is totally imbalanced. And then Punisher comes along and he's the ultimate imbalance, right? He's somebody who lost not only his personal life and the people he cared about, but also his humanity because of his pursuit of revenge. But then there's a scene where Peter kind of says something along those lines to Frank, and Frank snaps back at him and saying, "Do you think I chose this? Like, if I could get the people I care about back, I would do it immediately, right? And your problem is that you're choosing this, and you have other options when I don't, right? So I thought that little character moment where these two characters parallel themselves in some ways, but also don't in others, I thought was really, really good done. Probably one of the strongest character moments in this.
And do you not think that it also works well in the Jean Grey aspect? Because it's almost like in like that final scene where she goes into his mind and she almost like sits down and has a conversation with Aunt May, and like I think some of the elements of like Jean Grey's character was her and her sister was like cast aside by her mother, or like kind of like abandoned by her mother because of the way that they were, and it's almost like a reminder to Peter himself, to Spider-Man, of this is why it's important to have good people around you. This is why it's important to have people that are in your corner that are willing to support and give the right advice, because like and again I think it's important that they show it like quite early on when she discovers that he is Spider-Man, and he's still like in his early days, because I think he's always been a good person, and I think he's always been a good person because he's had Aunt May in his life this whole time, so he's already doing the right thing. But there's also like a burden and there's like a weight to it, and like she kind of like speaks to some of the realities or some of the possibilities that he might not thought of. Like there might be people that want to do harm to you, or there might be people that don't like you because you're different and might want to do terrible things to you, etc. And she kind of has a conversation with him, which kind of like aids to his development and his grounding. And almost like Sadie Sink is like, or like Jean Grey is almost like a mirror of like, this is again like Frank Castle was, when you isolate yourself into just being Spider-Man. Sadie Sink is like, or I keep calling her Sadie Sink, Jean Grey is kind of the reflection of having the right people and having like people in your corner that are like supporting you like whilst you are different to everyone else. How that also kind of like benefits you and like allows you to do what you do and be the person that you are. And like someone like Jean Grey in this, where she's kind of like lost her mother, lost her sister, hasn't had that connection with anyone, can almost go off the rails essentially.
So I think what they attempted to do was to kind of create this thematic resonance, right, between those three characters, and I think it works really well with Frank. I don't think it does work all that great with Jean, and the reason for it is that their reasons for being lonely are completely different, right? So Peter is lonely in order to protect the people he cares about, right? He cannot be around them, and he has to make them forget him, and he has to pay the price for it, but in return they can have a good life, right? Jean, on the other hand, is being shunned just for being different, and she is suffering because she's alone in this, and the last person which is her sister, who cared about her and who was still in her life, was taken away by damage control, right? And that is why she is acting out in this way, and that is why she is, on her revenge path, because everybody who she cared about let her down, and the one person who didn't was taken away by the system, or by the state, essentially, and that is why she's alone. And the last, much of the last act, I think, is supposed to have these two characters realize that they are more alike than they are different, and that is why Peter cares about her, and that is why Jean kind of walks away from the brink of becoming a full-on villain. And I think on paper I really like this, but maybe it was just because of the translation I watched, but I didn't really think it worked out in the details, just because their reasons for how they got there was so different that they ended up not having much in common between other than being lonely. But their reasons for being lonely and what they can do about it and their options and what they should do with in that situation is so different that I don't know that they actually have much in common in the end.
Yeah, I don't think it's like, for me anyways, I don't see it as like an exact parallel of like sort of the same situation that they had with Fan Castle. I kind of find it as like, the way I saw it was slightly different in the sense of having people in your corner. And I think, with Jean Grey in this, is that she was like well-rounded when she had a sister, and that was like almost ripped away. And yeah, that's because, the kind of situations around it were like different, but not all the way different, because like obviously in Spider-Man's situation, Aunt May was literally murdered in front of him. And I think that's why they kind of tap into the memory of Aunt May in this particular movie, because again, something bad happened to Spider-Man, where Green Goblin got his Aunt May killed, and he almost went off the rails. He almost like acted the way that she did, and he was going to kill Green Goblin at the end of No Way Home. But then it was like the conversations that he had with the other Spider-Man, and had like them being in his corner and like kind of talking him down. And I know that doesn't work because it's in a complete different movie, and this is kind of a continuation. But I think by this point they kind of expect people to have some type of knowledge, or go in with a little bit of knowledge of kind of what's happened before. So I think in a sense of like something bad happened to sort of both of like someone that they both cared about. And in Spider-Man's case in this movie, what like whilst he's like trying to like do things by himself, and whilst he's trying to like navigate things by himself, there's like certain like issues that he runs into as well. So like there's like the stuff with like his web fluids, or like his like kind of like web shoots or whatever, and you can kind of see like how Ned helps him to sort of kind of fill in like the missing pieces. And kind of likewise with MJ, who has like certain level of knowledge because she studied at MIT, when he's trying to like figure out what's going on with the suppressor that he's trying to put on, and like she's able to kind of like fill in the blanks. So again, it shows the importance of like having people there for you and having people in your corner. And it's almost like a reminder for him that he can't do it all by himself. And like, having that kind of like support. And I think it's just kind of him realizing that she's not a bad person. She just needs a certain level of like guidance. She just kind of needs someone in her corner, and like she needs a friend, and like basically Spider-Man is that person for her. And again, I think the relatability is she lost a sister in a violent way, and he also lost his aunt in a violent way. And again, he was able to kind of bring himself back from the brink, and he's here to help her do that.
But I wish they had made that explicit. Like, for instance, the thing about Green Goblin, something about like, I know somebody took away your sister, and I know what that's like because somebody took away my aunt, and so on, right? Like that is a real.
Sorry, I think they, in the English version, I think they do say something. I think they do say that. I don't know.
Okay, because what I got was a pep talk about how it's okay to be different.
From Aunt May or from Spider-Man?
From Aunt May.
No, I think it's in a conversation that they're having, and Spider-Man says to her like, I lost someone as well, and he kind of like explains that he lost. And I think that's like, I think they like emphasize that as well in terms of him constantly going to the grave and like leaving flowers and stuff like that for her, in the sense of like how important she was to him. But I think there's definitely a line in the movie, or in the English version anyways, where he does say that I also lost my Aunt May in a bad way.
Yeah, and I wish they had, like, for instance, if like they have a whole bunch of flashbacks in this, right, to different episodes, and I wish they had included one about how May died. So just to make that connection explicit, because it had been a few years since I watched the last movie, and so I don't quite remember the details. I remember she died, I don't remember all the details, and I think if that connection had been made explicit, or if it had been explicitly talked about in the dialogue, I think that would have been stronger. And one thing that also weakens it is that, like, I think there's two things. One is that this is not a lesson Peter has to learn. He doesn't need to learn the value of having people in your life, right? He knows this, right? And his tragedy is that he had to cut them out for their sake, and he's paying the price. The other aspect is that the first Jean does is to validate his choice, right, to that decision, because the first thing she does when she finds out who Peter Parker is to go after MJ, right? So everything Jean Grey does supports this idea that it is not safe for other people to be in Peter's life.
That is true. I'm trying to think of like a answer to that part.
And that is kind of what I mean by it's a little undercooked thematically, right? Because there's clearly parallels here, and there's clearly something for Spider-Man and Jean Grey to have in common and bond over. And like, it is like, I think one thing that bothers me about the whole Jean Grey plot is that, if you just look at what she does and how she behaves, it's very standard psychic stuff, right? Like the psychic who goes on a rampage because she was being experimented on and mistreated. And like even the imagery is like the most, like if you've seen Carrie, if you've seen Stranger Things, like it's all the same imagery, right? And I think that was one of the things that left me a little bit underwhelmed, because they're just going to those tropes just a little bit, like they're not very developed, right? Not very specific. But this whole idea that Peter can get through to her because he's been through similar things, I think that is the aspect that should have been really leaned into, and that they really needed to make sick. And I think it falls a little bit short of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I might agree to disagree here, but also I've only watched this once, and like I kind of want to like watch it again just to kind of really see how those elements really come together in the movie. But for me, anyways, for me it worked. Like I feel like they did a good job connecting it. But it's kind of move it on. How like, what were your thoughts on like how it kind of connected to kind of like the wider MCU universe in terms of like what it brought in and sort of its implications kind of moving forward as well?
I don't mind. I'm jumping into this one. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really know. It felt like a separate story from the MCU, because I was trying to understand, like specifically like with Yelena's character. I think maybe that was just added in for. I don't know if she's a fan favorite, but I think it was just for just that purpose, right? But I was trying to think, okay, how could this add to the wider MCU story? And I wasn't too sure. Even with the post-credit scene, which I didn't see, I did check on this on social media, and it said how it was Spider-Man. It was a Spider-Man tracker, and it was his kind of like image popped up in like a dark spot or something like that. I'm not too sure. Did you guys also see the post-credit scene?
Yeah, I saw it. I think it has like a few different ways you can maybe interpret it. I think maybe the main one is like there might be like a Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield coming back for a Doomsday.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's probably the only part then which I thought was kind of incorporated well with the wider MCU storyline. Because with this Spider-Man film, I just thought it was a complete separate entity in a way. I just think it was just its own story. But I wasn't mad at that. To be fair, I don't know what I was expecting when it comes to how it was going to incorporate to the bigger MCU storyline picture. And I think it should have, because when it comes to Avengers Doomsday, it does kind of feel random. Like it hasn't really been, in comparison to the previous phases, this one doesn't really feel like there's been a well-developed continuous storyline to, in terms of the other MCU movies, which builds upon, the big film, which is the Avengers. This one doesn't feel like there's been a good gradual build up. So I think Spider-Man, to be fair, should have took that opportunity to kind of like bridge the gap, if that makes sense. But this one, I just think it was its own separate movie, and I'm not mad that it was its own separate movie, but in the grand scheme of things, it probably should have, created a storyline which has people anticipating Avengers Doomsday even more. It seems like the reaction to Avengers Doomsday is 50-50, and yeah, I think Spider-Man should have took the opportunity to to just bridge the gap.
So one of the, if you go back to our MCU reviews from last year, one of the biggest complaints I had was that this MCU doesn't have a status quo, right? Like there isn't a sense of what the MCU is like and what is happening in it and what the big conflicts are, and even to what extent the world has adapted to superheroes existing. And first of all, I think this one does a pretty decent job, right? Just damage control existing kind of shows us that people are reacting to superheroes and powers and all of that just being a thing, and it's not as dumb as in what was it, Brave New World, where people are acting as if nobody had ever used mind control before, right? Here people are recognizing that mind control is happening, and they've got like a short list of things it could be, and so they start investigating and so on, right? And I think that was a positive thing. I think this also does a lot to set up kind of like the MCU has been like a universe in search of a story, and I think they're setting up the X-Men in a way that I thought was actually really cool, where Spider-Man is like, you had the Hulk, who has always been about suppressing the Hulk, and Spider-Man is learning that that his spider side is kind of taking over, or he's losing control, and so he's looking for a way to control it. And then along comes Jean Grey, who's been told that she was born defective and needs to be controlled, and it's just dangerous for existing, right? So that thematic space I think is really strong. And the inhibitor I think is really significant, because Peter Parker is the reason mutants will be put in camps in like 5 movies from now, right? Like this is where this is heading. Damage control, by taking the inhibitor from Peter, now has a way to turn off mutations and superpowers. And that means that when X-Men are being put in camps and in prisons, they will be using Parker tech to do this. And that will, like, that's the ultimate guilt trip, right? Like he did it with good intentions and just to improve his life and to improve anybody who wants the help, and it's going to be a tool of oppression. And that is a really big screw you to Peter Parker, right? Like the Marvel universe always looks for new ways to screw up Peter Parker, and this is a really strong one.
See, I like the fact that it's kind of come from Spider-Man, and they've sort of incorporated it sort of in his movie, like you said, where it was like something innocent that's going to have a wide implication for like the rest of the X-Men that will be coming after Secret Wars. But I don't know. Is there a world in which it's bad that it's come from this movie and that it should have been more X-Men focused, even though we do have an X-Men character in this, but it should have come in like an X-Men movie from like a stereotypical like X-Men villain, for example, where I like the fact that because it's a shared universe, that something that's happened over here can like impact something like somewhere else, and like there's like that level of crossover between the sort of different characters and different teams in this. But I don't know if there's like a world where people complain that why is this in Spider-Man, because I did see some things of like why are we getting Jean Grey in sort of Spider-Man, why is she being introduced here, like, you know, why is she the villain of Spider-Man.
In general, I think it is a good, like, Hervé, I totally agree that connecting the different parts of the MCU and having ramifications forwards is a good thing. Like, this is not like the X-Men movies crossing over with the MCU. The X-Men that we're going to get are going to be part of the MCU in the first place, and they're all part of the same world, right? And one of the questions has always been, why does the Marvel universe hate mutants so much, but they are okay with Spider-Man or people with other superpowers, right? Why is having your genes changed by a random mutation bad, but why is having your genes changed by an accident okay, right? Like, that's never really made sense, and that's because it was just characters that were kind of existing on their own, and they eventually occasionally crossed over. And the MCU has always been an opportunity to kind of redo that part of it and make that make more sense. And here we have, together with the Hulk, a whole bunch of people who are creating precedent for why people running around with uncontrollable powers is a bad thing, right? When the X-Men start showing up and people are going to ask, like, are they a threat? Then some people can point to the Hulk, for instance, and say, yeah, obviously it is a threat. And Bruce Banner is the first person to confirm this. So I do think it makes it all tie together a little bit more, and it makes like the whole thing a little bit more rounded.
Yeah, fair. I didn't actually think of the Hulk aspect. I mean, I think that's a clear reason why he's actually in this movie as well, because of like the kind of mutation within him. But yeah, no, that's a good point, because I think actually they make a specific point about having that news anchor section in the movie as well, when they kind of discuss the Hulk and like him rampaging. I think actually that might actually be sowing some of the seeds that's to come in the future, in terms of like you said, that attitude that they have towards sort of super able people, and even to like a lesser extent, like what Spider-Man did when he slams Scorpion into the police car and the policewoman was injured. Even though I think that's kind of like smaller, and like people still love Spider-Man, it's just kind of like things like that can really start to change the perspective on sort of superpowered beings in the world.
Yeah, and she makes it very clear that she's going to cover this up, but that's only going to work once, right? If he keeps killing cops, or once he starts killing cops, it's going to be over. He's actually going to be the menace that J. Jonah Jameson always said he was.
So my question is, so I do see definitely how, you know, they use Spider-Man as a vehicle to, you know, introduce the X-Men. However, because I don't believe there is going to be another MCU film after this one, well, it's going to be Doomsday, but what I'm saying, I don't think there's going to be another MCU movie from like a different character. It feels like, shouldn't they have taken this opportunity to just to utilize the build up towards Doomsday? Because I don't feel like there's been enough story from other characters within the MCU to build up towards Avengers Doomsday. It just feels like we're being presented with Avengers Doomsday.
I kind of see it as like this is part of what's to come after Secret Wars, because I think there was like talk of, you know, after Secret Wars it's going to be like one continuous timeline, and they're going to like scrap the multiverse stuff, and it's going to be like a continuation, and it's going to be some of the stuff that we've seen before, and I think we've got confirmation with that, with like, you know, things like Black Panther 3, etc. And then there'll be like new elements to it as well. And I actually don't even think Tom Holland's in Doomsday as well, so it wouldn't really make sense to kind of have anything happening in this movie build up to Doomsday. I think Doomsday's kind of like it's kind of like own thing, and there's going to be like a lot of like older characters that are coming back, and I think it's almost like a final send off, even though we've kind of had a few send offs for these people, and it's kind of getting a little bit not lame or whatever. Like, it's going to be nice to kind of see like, you know, the old X-Men and, you know, the Avengers and, you know, some of the old characters. Maybe we get like one of the older Spider-Mans in the movie. It's going to be nice to kind of see them all interact. But, you know, we had Avengers Endgame where we kind of said goodbye to like some of these characters. We had like things like Deadpool and Wolverine. We had like Old Man Logan. Like, we've kind of said goodbye to this universe. We had like we've kind of said goodbye a few times. So I'm a little bit, you know, disappointed that we're kind of doing it one more time in Doomsday. But I have faith in the Russo bros. They've kind of delivered each time that they've, like, for the most part, they've delivered every time that they've been in the MCU. So I kind of have faith in what they're doing.
So I think Doomsday is going to be a little bit of an anomaly, because they made that at a point where they had nothing going on. So it is weird that we are getting Brand New Day, which is a bit of a fresh start, or like at the start of a new story, right? Right before an Avengers movie that has zero build up for it, and that Avengers movie is full of old things, right? We've got Ian McKellen, we've got Patrick Stewart, we've got Steve Rogers is coming back, right? We're cracking the in case of box office drop use Doom box, right? We're doing that. So Doomsday, like, it might still be a good movie, but if it is, it's gonna be a standalone movie, and it's gonna be another like you said, like the Deadpool 3, where it's a lot of references and callbacks, and like however you said, it's gonna be another goodbye, right? It's another epilogue kind of thing. So it seems to me like in the grand scheme of things, Doomsday is gonna be kind of like an interlude kind of thing, and then the new story starts with what comes after that, and that is what we're setting up with in Brand New Day here.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I feel like all the other, in terms of who's involved in Doomsday, they've already been established. Because obviously you got the Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and obviously other like A-listers on that are already in the Avengers. It's just that X-Men, obviously they're going to be involved in Doomsday as well. They really haven't been, like, there's been elements of them, like especially in I think it was in Thunderbolts where there was a post-credit scene. So they definitely, they've been shown, but like I said, their story hasn't really been fully established. So it does, yeah. So it was actually it was good what in terms of the direction that Spider-Man took in this film to just add more to the presence of the X-Men within Avengers Doomsday. So yeah, I think they actually did the right thing with this one. It's crazy. Even though it seems like a goodbye, it doesn't really, like, I think this phase was it was very messy. It feels like this phase doesn't really feel like a phase. It feels like a trial phase, if that makes sense. I don't think they've really had as much of an impact in comparison to the previous phases that we've seen. So for us to be saying that it seems like it's going to be like a goodbye type of film, it doesn't even feel like, they came in and said hello.
What I will say, so there'll be like an element of like new and old in the Doomsday movie. But what I will say about this recent phase is we are on a little bit of a run. I will say, like, from Thunderbolts to Fantastic Four to the Spider-Man movie, I kind of call that a run of like really really good movies. I think Thunderbolts kind of took me by surprise. Like that one, I was just like, okay, like I don't know why we're doing this, but that was like a very very good movie. Fantastic Four, I was like that was good. It was good, and I think it was like more good than bad. Probably kind of like see it like maybe like 7.5 to like 8 out of 10, and then I think sort of Spider-Man Brand New Day kind of knocks it out of the park. So I think this like new approach of a little bit more focused, kind of less content and like actually focusing on the quality a little bit more has shown that we're like now getting better stuff than Ant-Man, Quantumania, and kind of some of those type of movies. So yeah, long may it continue into, like, I really hope that they learned their lesson from like the phase 4 and 5 where we were just kind of getting crap after crap. I really hope that they've learned their lesson, and sort of everything that comes afterwards is of quality.
They certainly seem to have realized that characters are what works for them, right? Like this is trying really, really hard to have real emotional beats and be very character focused, and it's very focused on Peter's internal journey, right? And his internal conflict of wanting things that are not compatible with each other and being torn apart by that and being torn in different directions. And what do you know? It gets 98% on Rotten Tomatoes from audiences, right? So you make a character care, you make an audience care about a character, and what do you know? People like them and want to see the next one, and this will easily crack 1 billion. And the real question is, will crack 2, right? And that is like, just go back just 6 months, and we would not have said this about an MCU movie, right? Like even Thunderbolts, which was generally liked, and people like Yelena, for instance, right? Like I've seen about a bunch of people get excited that she's in this, even though she doesn't do that much. But people have not generally not accepted or embraced the characters that they introduced in Phase 4 and 5, like anything since Endgame, right? And I think this is the beginning of kind of a turning point, or hopefully, like if they learn the right lessons from this, they will realize people like Spider-Man because of the character and not because the fight's also cool or because of cameos or because of jokes. I think it gets the balance of all of that really right, and it's certainly a step in the right direction, and it's more of a proper movie than the MCU has been in a while, even like, and that includes things like Thunderbolts last year.
So I just wanted to quickly go back on what Hervé said in terms of, it seems like they've learned their lesson from, just dropping movie after movie and actually focusing on, just dropping a few and concentrating on their story. I do agree with that to an extent. However, Phase 3, for example, I think they dropped around, I don't know how many movies they were. Let me check. Okay, it says they dropped 11 movies, right? And I think that was probably one of their best years because that was the year that Endgame came out. And this phase, I believe, is around 5 or 6. So I was gonna say, even though, yeah, you are right to an extent. However, is it enough though? Because, like I said, for me personally, I don't know if this is the general opinion, but it does feel like
you got to think of like the TV shows that they've dropped in that time as well. So yeah, while it's like not as many movies, but there's also the commitment to things like Wonder Man, which I'm actually upset that got cancelled. I kind of understand because like Destin Daniel Cretton was attached to that, and obviously he's doing Spiderman now. He's a busy man, especially after the amount of money that this movie's probably going to make. He's a busy man now, so I don't think they could have continued it without him. But they had like, you know, things like Moon Knight. They had like Loki going on at the same time. They had bloody Secret Invasion, that terrible show. So it's not just the movies. It's also like the TV shows, and it was just like content. Like they were just kind of like, we even got like stuff like Agatha, like Harkness and whatever. And like, yeah, people might have liked that, but I'm like, why? Like, for what reason?
I hear you, but I hear that. I was just gonna ask, because is it enough though? Because like I say, Doomsday does feel like it's got, I wouldn't say it's got nothing to work with, but it doesn't have as much of a story to work with. Because obviously it connects other stories from the previous movies from different characters. And I think Phase 11, sorry, not Phase 11, Phase 3 had enough for Endgame, because there was, multiple movies, and there were multiple good movies that came out during that phase. So with this one, even though there is like pretty much half, even though there's half, like, those movies are good, but is it enough to create, a good baseline for the Avengers Doomsday?
Yeah, I kind of hear what you're saying. I don't think all of those movies completely connected to what happened in Doomsday. Maybe more so in just like post credit scenes, etc. But I don't know, man. I think enough is known about Doomsday where there's like incursions happening. You know, we kind of explored it a little bit in Doctor Strange. We kind of explored traveling the multiverse in sort of things like Ant-Man, etc. In the Loki seasons. Fantastic Four has like an element of like relationship with Doom as well, and like Latveria and stuff like that. So I feel like there was like enough tease and enough like there to be like, okay, this is kind of what's happening and what's going on, where, you know, these like different branches of like universes can't coexist, and Doom is going to correct something in Doomsday, essentially. So I don't know, I think there's enough there, whilst there isn't like the same level of like things that happened before. I think like something like Infinity War and Endgame are kind of like one of a kind, and you're not going to get that same level of like build up where you had like 3 Iron Man movies, Captain America movies, Avengers 1, Avengers 2, kind of like there was like too much like leading up to that. I think Doomsday, we have enough. I think it's fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so one last thing I wanted to kind of bring up is that I seem to be pretty alone in saying that this movie is an hour too long and the two different halves don't really speak enough to each other. But would this have been a better movie if him rejoining or kind of going back on Doctor Strange's spell and rejoining him with rejoining his friends had been something that was set up in this but actually happened in the next Spider-Man? Or is this movie the right place for that?
I think the movie is the right place for this in terms of like his kind of like journey that he goes on to kind of isolating himself, and especially like having the parallels of like Frank Castle in this, etc., and, you know, needing to kind of reach out to like the people close to him. And I think it's also kind of standard to have someone close to Spider-Man be in danger, and, you know, Aunt May is dead. There's no Uncle Ben. Like his relationship with Happy is probably non-existent as well. So the only person that really made sense was to have like MJ come again, unless you wanted to like introduce a new love interest, but then at that point you then wouldn't have the others come back at a later point. I don't know. I feel like this was the right movie. I also feel like I don't really say about the movie being an hour too long. Honestly, I was like genuinely like getting towards the end of the movie, and I was like, I don't want this to end. Like I was like, can you find another half an hour? Or just like anything to do in this movie. So yeah, you might be alone in feeling that, but I don't know. I thought it was like right happening in this movie.
Yeah, it just seemed to me like every time he was kind of pining after MJ and Ned, and he was again talking about how difficult it is to be alone and all of that, I felt like it was kind of going in circles a little bit, and it was kind of spinning its wheels a little bit. And then like the moment where he kind of one of the strongest emotional moments in this is when Jean is possessing MJ and pretends that MJ remembers him and says she loves him, and you can see like an entire mountain for like melt off his chest, right? Like he's so glad that he's at that point, and he's wanted to say this for so long, or wanted to hear her say this for so long, and he couldn't. And then he realizes it's a fake out, and Jean is messing with him, and it hurts him. It really breaks, right? Like that's one of the strongest emotional moments in this. I'm just asking if it came too soon, right? Because if you watch these movies in sequence, at the end of the last movie, he makes this monumental choice to make the world forget him, and then in like 2/3 of the way into the next movie, he's already going back on it, right? And he's already undoing the spell, right? Like, isn't that a bit fast?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying now in terms of like the emotional weight of it, of like if we'd seen it, like if we'd seen him like really like live his life a little bit more, like through like another movie or two, and then make that reconnection, I think would that have like had more emotional weight to it, and maybe kind of solidified like that relationship a little more, maybe potentially. I also think the other like gut-wrenching moment in this movie was when she says like, I don't love you, because she doesn't like, she's like, those are not my memories, I don't love you. And I felt like that was just like such a gut punch in the cinema as well. That was like, damn. And then and then he does that whole he does that whole like jumping across the roofs like without his costume in his like Peter Parker form after he sees that she has like another boyfriend. Like I think it's like bad enough to see that they've like lived the life that they were meant to live together in terms of like going to college, moving in together, etc. And then to see like MJ actually have another boyfriend, actually have moved on. That was
Who never appears again.
Yeah, I know. He's kind of talked about at one point, but kind of doesn't appear again, which is
So like maybe like it shouldn't drag this out for 10 years, right? But it's clearly so like they're trying to do trilogies, right? So this is the start of the second trilogy. Maybe have this be the status quo for the second trilogy, and then in movie 6 he fixes it, right? So this is where we see where like he's struggling with being alone. Next movie it would be important to him, but he's trying to deal with it or something. And then the 6th movie he goes back on it, because like remind me, because I think you remember the last movie better than I do, but doesn't revealing himself to MJ and Ned break the spell, or does the world still forget Parker, but he can selectively share his identity with people?
He can selectively share his identity. That's why he has like the whole like letter thing where like you might not remember me, but like we're like with this, and I had to like do this forever. Like that's why he has a letter, but can't bring himself to actually speak to them and like share the letter. And I think
that might be a storytelling. That might be a storytelling mistake, because now he can just pick and choose who he wants him to remember, and like he doesn't have to make like, it's not like if he wants MJ back in his life, he has to undo everything Doctor Strange did, right? Like it seems like that would be a stronger story, maybe. And it seems like just one final point. It seems like he reveals his identity twice, right? Once to Ned, first to MJ in the second act, and then in the very last scene to Ned, and it doesn't seem to have ramifications or consequences.
I don't think that they broke the spell. I don't think they broke the spell, because even when MJ found out, it's not like she kind of like had the flood of like memories come back. She was like, that's a different person. Like I don't know you. And even like Ned at the end with the handshake, like they do the handshake, and it's almost like reflex memory that they're able to do the handshake. And it's I don't know whether it's confirmed that any of the memories come back. I think it's more so, I think MJ said that Spider-Man's name is Peter, and I think he kind of like remembers, oh, Peter, like Peter as in Spider-Man. But I don't know. I think that maybe like they'll look at that in the next movie. But I don't think it's like going back on it or like messing anything up, because I think it adds to like the emotional weight of like the trouble that he's going through. Is like he has this secret identity that he wants to maintain and like protect the people that he cares about, even though like it doesn't work, because he's kind of dealing with the psychic in this movie. But he's trying to protect them, and then he has to kind of like wrestle with what the right thing is to do. And I think in this, MJ was like, I would at least like to have like a choice in the matter or whatever. But yeah,
and I also don't understand why she immediately goes for it, right? Like as far as she is concerned, a total stranger shows up and tells you love me, you just don't remember it, just trust me on this, right? Like shouldn't she react much more negatively to this?
No, she does, no, because like when he first shows
up a little bit, but she comes around.
Does she? Like I think no, I don't think she. I think she's like fine with it, like in the sense of like they kind of have like the whole conversation, they have like a bit of an argument, and then she says like, I'm not that person that you like, I don't have those memories, I'm like not that person. And then she asks him to drop her home, and then she kind of like allows him to have like an interaction with like Ned, and she kind of like sits back and watches. But I don't know, I don't think there's like this element of she was like they're like fine and then like getting back in a relationship or anything like that. If anything, it was almost like a bit of like closure for him of like, maybe I also need to like move on from this. I don't know, but I didn't get that like she was like just kind of like fine with it.
No, she's not outright in love with him again, right? But it seems to me like she kind of goes along with it. Like she does reject him, saying, I don't remember any of the things you said, you're talking about, therefore I don't love you, right? Like that's certainly there. I'm just saying, it seems to me like from her point of view, he's still some guy, right? Like it seemed to me like it should have been much more negative, especially when he starts showing up in her place and keeps showing up, right? Anyway, not a huge thing, but it seems to me like that's a little bit reaching. I think it's mostly because we want them, like we want her to be a big part in the movie, and therefore she can't just outright reject him. She does in the sense of saying I don't love you, but she's still part of the story from that point on.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I didn't think too much.
Yeah, and I think part of this is also that it's very quick, right? Like the whole thing basically unfolds in an hour, and if this had been scattered over 2 or 3 movies, we would have had a stronger idea of just how the spell works and what Mary Jane thinks about this, what Ned thinks about this, what Peter thinks about this, and they try and fail to make it work, or he tries to move on and can't, or she kind of keeps having this feeling, because it seems to me like their memories, both for her and for Ned, are still there. They're just bottled up by the spell, right? And that's the whole thing about the handshake, right? Like that memory of them doing this handshake is still there somewhere. Like didn't get deleted by the spell, right? So, and I feel like if this had like an additional movie to breathe, then the character choices would have had more weight, possibly.
My last thoughts. I'm gonna give this one a strong 7 out of 10. Like I said, it was a good movie. It was just a bit underwhelming because there was such a high expectation. Well, it was very in demand, and I forgot what the previous movies were about, and in terms of like the tone and just the standard of the films. So maybe this is the typical Spider-Man standard. If that was the case, then probably my expectation would have been a bit different. But I was just going off mainly the trailer and obviously how high in demand this movie was. But like I said, it's not a bad film at all. It was a good film. 7 out of 10 is a very good film, and I did really like the character interactions, especially between Spider-Man and Punisher. I wouldn't be mad at them doing like a duo type of film. I definitely wouldn't be mad at that. So yeah, overall, I did have a good time, good experience with this one, and it did make sense why this was, just like the introduction of Jean Grey's character, especially hopefully she's going to be in the X-Men, right?
She's one of the big X-Men characters.
Yeah.
She's going to be the new Professor X, probably.
Yeah. So overall, just to round up, I had a good time with this one, and I would definitely recommend for you guys to go watch it.
Yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. I think this might be only the first 10 out of 10 I've given on this, but this is a 10 out of 10. This was fantastic. Even down to like the cinema experience. I know, Jonathan, you kind of touched on it briefly in your introduction, but this is the first time I pulled up to the cinema, and like I was there before the trailer started, and I think 90% of the cinema was already in seat waiting for the movie to start. Like, and it was like you said as well, I didn't expect the feel, like kind of like the, is it I not the right word, but I didn't expect the anticipation for this to be extremely high. And I was like trying to book a ticket for the weekend, and literally everything was like pretty much sold out. So I was like, oh, before I get spoiled on this, let me just try find a seat on a Wednesday. And I was like, it's just in like a little corner somewhere on the screen. And luckily a few people next to me didn't show up, so I was like able to scoot into the middle a little bit and like have a better seat or a better view of the movie at that point. But I don't know, man, it was just great to kind of see everyone turn out for movie. Like people, like I even checked Odyssey because I was like, oh, I wonder like how does it impact Odyssey? And I checked like an IMAX viewing for Odyssey and like a standard viewing, and both were like almost sold out to the film as well. So it's good to see that people are enjoying cinema again, and long may it continue.
Yeah, so my final verdict is I think this is the best movie the MCU has made in a while. And I did quite like Thunderbolts as well, but just as a proper movie with proper characters and proper emotional beats and a story that makes sense, like this is definitely up there. And if this is more or less indicative of what the MCU is going to be like in the future, then I'm on board with the next decade. They said something like they've got plans until 2040 or some nonsense like that. And I rolled my eyes when I saw that, but after Brand New Day, they might just be able to pull it off. I still do think this is two separate movies that are kind of smashed together. I do think some of the thematic stuff is really interesting, but because it's so crowded, is a little bit underdeveloped and isn't quite taken as far as I would have liked it to be. I do wish they pick up on this whole thing about the inhibitors and the mutations and so on, like not just in X-Men movies, but just in general. I think they have enough of an idea here that this can be taken somewhere interesting. I do hope this is the beginning of an MCU that is about something and like as in has a story going on, as opposed to just continued attempts to keep the franchise alive, and that's all there is to it, which is what we've had throughout Phase 4 for the most part. It is nice to see people just be into these characters. And I watch this with people who are not superhero movies at all, who are not into superhero movies at all, and they like this, right? Like, few times they leaned over to me and said, "Oh, this is cool." Like, especially the ninja fight scene, that sort of thing, but also the emotional beats. I think this works just as a movie. So final verdict is amazing out of Ultimate.
Hi guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion. Hervé.
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate you pressing play, giving us a listen, and just generally checking us out. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed the discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a whole bunch of nonsense, then I hope you get mind controlled into some traffic. We are the Have This On podcast.
Good one. All right guys, we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.